What's up, and welcome into the DePaul Hoops podcast with Andy Thompson. I am Nick Palazzolo. We are a part of the Big East Energy Network, and DePaul played a closer game than most people realized against Stonehill. We'll get into that. We'll preview Buffalo. Does DePaul have a backup point guard issue? We'll talk about that. We'll also touch on the women's game against UNLV. All of that and more is coming up next.
Look to his shot.
Spins, fade away. Yes, sir. Chandler hits the three.
Oh, tough shot. Giving it up to Reed.
Well, Andy, you are certainly not going to apologize for a win because winning is hard. But last week against Stonehill, just wow, had a 30-5 lead, 25-point total lead. That was then down to 8, then down to 7, and then you were down 2. And DePaul goes ahead and pulls out a win, 72-64 over another NEC school. Where do you want to start with this game? Because this game it was a tale of the first 15 minutes and then just the final 25 minutes.
Yeah, so I remember at about the 5-minute mark of that game, I was contemplating to myself, like, how am I going to word the halftime tweet saying DePaul just played one of its best defensive halves in recent memory after UConn was doing, at the same time, inhumane things to UMass Lowell. And the score was like 64-17 at the half. I was expecting, like, we'd have that kind of a halftime performance where our offense wasn't firing like that, but the defense would be just as good. Stonehill closes on a 19-7 run, and then the team just comes out of the half, and the nervous energy in Wintrust Arena was like something I haven't
palpable. That was palpable.
Yeah, palpable buzz, as John Rothstein would say, but not the right kind of buzz.
Right.
The nervous energy in Wintrust was like something I haven't felt probably since that Long Beach State game when you had no timeouts left by halftime. I'm not comparing the two coaching jobs at all because Holtmann did a great job finishing that one out, I'll be honest.
Correct.
But the nervous energy from the fans was just, I haven't felt that since 2 years ago. And it's really a feeling that I hope we've only felt once this year. Like, I hope that doesn't ever come back because, I mean, this team has so much promise, but there were a few minutes in that second half where I was just mystified some of the things that were going on, like offensively. The thing about that game is the defense was fine. Like, you look on KenPom, our defense is still 73rd, but we just could not buy a bucket for like several minutes in the middle of that second half. And it was to the point where, like, you had, guys just rushing the ball up the court, trying to make something happen. They'd fall over and have to give the ball to a teammate who would then get double teamed and it'd be a turnover. They did only have, I believe, 7 turnovers in that game, so overall good ball security. But the turnovers they did have were loud. The misses they had at the free throw line were loud. And there were just some things that you'd like to see tightened up. But I did like the way Holtmann came into the press conference, very calm, cool, and composed, which shows that they're going to put this one behind them. The team knows what they need to work on, and I would almost rather you find this out now than have that be a week later against Northwestern, and then you've got the fan base wondering, has anything changed from the previous years?
We're going to get that conversation at some point this year. There's going to be something that happens. I don't know what it is. I don't know what game it's going to happen, but we will probably have to have that conversation because we will rinse and repeat it. But the thing about that Stonehill game is the first 15 minutes of that first half was just so incredible. It was just so incredible. Like, the defense, and Holtmann mentioned it today on his media availability, that everything was working, everything was clicking, everybody was communicating, the switches were great. They're really active on defense. And then the final 25 minutes, I mean, good Lord. I mean, I was stunned. Like, and it was only and it was still a 13-point game at half. Like, it was 37-24 at halftime. And it was like one of those things where you look at it and it's like, once you get into that second half, it's like, are we really about to lose this game? Like, are we really going to do that? And I think that nervous energy kind of went away after that alley-oop to NJ in the second half. But DePaul just... And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I was like, DePaul needed a guy. DePaul needed a guy to just, you know what, say, screw it, take over the game. We just need somebody to do that. And that guy was CJ Gunn. And I mean, CJ, 15 points in the first half, finished with 28, didn't honestly score his 13 points until the final 8-ish minutes
Yeah, it was
of
a fast
the
there,
game.
too.
But like he essentially grabbed the ball and it was like, if we're winning, it's because of me. And that's honestly what DePaul needed on Friday.
No, I would 100% agree. I think DePaul needed somebody who was going to come out and say, okay, I'm going to be the guy today, because the offense, as we talked about for several minutes in the second half, the thing that was really interesting about that game was DePaul wasn't taking bad shots. None of them were falling. None of them were falling at all. Like 23 of 62 from the field, but it isn't the type of shooting performance you'd look at in a box score and think, okay, they took bad shots. They were getting quality looks from beyond the three-point line. They were taking fairly decent two-point shots for the most part, and they just could not buy a bucket for that stretch. But I think the most stark thing about that game was if you look at the free throw shooting, where you had CJ Gunn, who was 10 of 12 at the line, which, as Holtmann aptly said after, he is our best three-point shooter of the season. But if you take away Gunn, the rest of the team was 11 of 23 at the line. Obviously, in a non-conference, have some jitters. You're gonna have some things to work out, but in league play, that is just simply not going to cut it. And I'll be flat out there. 11 of 23 from the line, from the rest of your guys, not named CJ Gunn, who fortunately was not in any kind of foul trouble this game. He only had 2, whereas he's had in both exhibitions he had 3 first half fouls. So that was good to see. But we've got to see somebody else. I guess Macklin 3 of 4 at the line, RJ Smith 3 of 4 at the line as well.
Well, and
with a ripped jersey, by the way.
Yeah.
So you had some other guys who were still shooting well at the line, and Layden 2 of 2. By the way, did you know Layden has not missed a free throw this season?
Yes, I did, because I was scanning through the game notes, so I did know that. But what I will say,
your fun facts.
This is true. But what I will say, and it's really interesting, because I asked Holtmann about it post game on Friday. We don't need to get into what else happened post game.
I wish we had the clip, but I'll spare you.
Thank you. I asked him about putting the emphasis on getting to the line, because back-to-back games, I think they've gone to the line 70 times, 35 times in each game. And that's interesting, because I think at times last year, DePaul would get into a spot where they would get into the double bonus with about half of the half. So about 10 minutes to play in the half. And they just seemingly couldn't get to the line. So I asked Holtmann point blank. I was like, did you guys put an emphasis on getting to the line? And he said yes. And I think that's important. But here's the thing. Getting to the line doesn't count. You need to put the ball in the basket. For it to mean anything. Because, again, what was NJ? 2 of 10? Is that what he was from the line? 2 of 10? Yeah, 2 of 10 from the free throw line. There were 3 lane violations.
3 lane, but I had my mistake.
I think it was 3. There was 2 or 3 lane violations that also led to a missed free throw. That just didn't count. And it was like frustrating watching it. Because... Maybe I'll ask Holt this tomorrow if free throw shooting is bad again tomorrow night. But here's what I want to know, because he mentioned the sightlines and practicing at Wintrust more, and I think that is a totally valid reason. But is shooting free throws and getting better at them as simple as just shooting more of them? Like, is there something collectively that this group is not doing besides shooting them? Like, does that make sense? Like, is there something else you can do besides shooting more? Because just because you do more of it doesn't mean you're going to get better at it. Just in a general sense. Arguably, you would think that would happen, but it doesn't always happen. And I think we've reached, even in the exhibitions, I think we've reached a level of concern about free throw shooting. Again, 4 games, 2 games, whatever you want to count. I don't really care about the exhibitions in a way. But again, a free throw is a free throw. It's still a game environment. A free throw is a free throw. So there's only so much you can do. So that's why I'm interested to see tomorrow night against Buffalo. But like, it's just really interesting that DePaul literally needed CJ Gunn to step up and be that guy. They needed him to just go make a play. Because it felt like at times, like NJ had a double-double, but again, he missed 8 free throws. Again, that's not a knock on NJ or the night he had. Again,
by the way,
he had 5 blocks or 6
NJ
blocks.
was, by the way, Big East honor roll this week for 16, 10, and 4 blocks on 77.8 shooting from the field. NJ was Big East honor roll this week. I just want to say that about him as well.
Yeah, NJ had 8 blocks last week.
Yes,
in the 2 games. He had 6 against Stonehill, 2 against Chi State.
And the 6 was a career run.
But I just think it's really interesting that where this team is at offensively, they're doing the little things right in, creating contact and getting to the line, but it's just seemingly been an execution problem. Like, they've had good shots and they've had open looks. They're just not falling. And like, that's where it's kind of frustrating. And I know it's probably frustrating for the coaching staff, where it's like, what we're getting everything we want. It's just an execution problem.
Well, I think this real quick, I'll give a stat here, and then we'll kind of move on to another area or two of the game before we talk about Buffalo. And we got some things to talk about Buffalo, unfortunately. I think the most stark illustration of where we're at here is DePaul is currently tied for 23rd out of all 365 Division I programs in free throw attempts per game, with the 35 per game, as you mentioned. But right now, DePaul ranks 269th out of those same 365 Division I programs into converting those free throw attempts into points, with 64.29% of those 70 free throws being converted. So I think that is a percentage that you would like to see get up to at least the low 70s by the time Big East play rolls around, so you can feel confident about if this team isn't a close game, is somebody, like you said, besides CJ, going to be able to close a game out.
Yeah, and I think at times, like Blocker, I don't want to say non-factor because he still did some good things, but like offensively a non-factor. Defensively he's fine. He's a plus 12, yes. I think. But just offensively, he just wasn't there. Like, again, because of their kind of motions they use, they went under screens a lot instead of going over. So that probably led to a little bit with Blocker, just lack of production or lack of production. But it's just really interesting to me. And Andy, before we get into just some other things, I think big picture, I think this is a good time to bring up the backup point guard spot, because I don't know how to feel about it, because it feels like they have like 4 backup point guards, except none of them really play like in that spot, if that makes sense. And I think Cruz is your best option. Cruz McClure, the true freshman from Ohio. I think he is your best option. However, what I want to know is with Cruz, I think he is your best backup point guard option. But when do they start to give him run just to learn through mistakes and just play through those kind of growing pains just so he can get to that backup spot a little faster? Like, that's what I want to know.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think, the last game, obviously that I really think that the lower body injury was harder on his preseason development than even the staff would like to admit. And I don't fault them for not wanting to admit that, because, it's tough when you've got a freshman that comes in with a lot more promise than most DePaul freshmen have. And then he can't spend the last month of the offseason getting ready for the reps that they do want to throw at him. Because from what we've both heard, they want to give him a major role on this team. They just have not been able to get him there yet, by no fault of his own. Right. But, I do think what illustrates how far along he is in the 4 minutes he played at the backup point guard spot, you almost felt just as good about him as you did Layden. Like, he had a really nice crossover or two against some opposing defenders. He got himself for the free throw line for the first time as a college player. Obviously, that kind of night, so he is 0 for 2 there, but he's also a freshman. He's got things to learn independent of the team shooting collectively there, so there's other things going on. He just has to get himself comfortable with the flow of the game. But I did really like his minutes at the backup point. And I think one thing that I'd like to see in the next few weeks, as the staff is more comfortable with Cruz's minutes and as Cruz is more comfortable with the work he's put in, the rehab he's put in to get himself back, one thing that I do want to see is whether it's Cruz bringing up the ball or Brandon Macklin, who, by the way, currently has an assist to turnover ratio of 4.5. He's averaging 4.5 assists a game, 1 turnover a game, which is stellar at any position, let alone the guard spot. I just want to see over the next few weeks, because I know it's going to be a process. It isn't like we're going to blink tomorrow night, this will be solved in one game, because it's going to take a while. But one thing I want to do is, I think some of the three-point shooting struggles have come because one of the best three-point shooters on the team has less of an ability to create for himself at the top of the key than some of our other guards do. And unfortunately, when you have the ball in RJ Smith's hands at the top of the key, he is not going to be able to free himself up as much to get his lethal three-point shot off, because he is one of the best catch-and-shoot three-point shooters, I would say, in the country. We just haven't been able to unleash that yet because he hasn't had the time or the people around him to kind of free himself up to play off ball.
Yeah, and I think that's where Cruz's development is really interesting, because I completely agree with what you're saying with RJ, but I don't think it's in Buffalo. Or again in the Buffalo game. It certainly won't be the Northwestern game. But after that, you have a four games, the front two, and then the back two of a 6-game stretch. You have Gardner-Webb, Detroit Mercy, and then you have the Georgia Tech, the Emerald Coast Classic, where you play Georgia Tech, and then LSU or Drake. And then you have Arkansas Pine Bluff, and then Morgan State. I think if Cruz cannot get meaningful minutes in the Gardner-Webb, Detroit Mercy, Arkansas Pine Bluff, or Morgan State, I don't know if we'll ever see it this year, outside of something, an injury or something unforeseen. Because I feel like Cruz is the kind of guy, you just need to, his skill is too good to deny, but you just have to get him to a point where he's comfortable with the speed of the college game and the physicality. And that's something you can only really get from playing. So I think that the next, month is really, really huge for that backup point guard role, just so we can get RJ off the ball a little bit and allow him to do what he does best. Because as of right now, DePaul shooting 26.5% from 3. That is not something that you want to do. That's how you lose games. It's not even about winning games. That's just losing. You're not giving yourself a chance. 43.5% from the field total, 26.5% from 3. Your field goal or your free throw percentage is 64%. Again, these are some things that I think will get better as this group kind of through osmosis just plays more together. But I think that Cruz's development is the biggest looming question over what this DePaul team can be.
No, I do agree there definitely to an extent. But one thing that I do want to point out about that shooting that you said, Evan Miyakawa on his site, he talked about, he has a 2 targets profile for every single team, where basically there's 2 targets that typically if a team hits those targets during a game, they're going to be able to win most games. And for DePaul, it was shooting greater than 52.8% from 2 and 33.3% from 3. They are 11-1 under Coach Holtmann when they hit both of those things, and they're combined 5-19 when they hit 1 or fewer of those. And one of those 5 wins is against Stonehill by 8 points. So that type of shooting that we just had is not sustainable, because you barely beat an NEC team by not hitting at least one of those 2 targets, which again, 52.8% from 2 or 33.3% from 3, which isn't asking a terrible amount of a team that does have as much offensive firepower as this team is capable of having, as they displayed against Chicago State.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think that part of it too is defense will always be ahead of the offense. Just the nature of the beast. Any sport, baseball, football, basketball, NBA basketball, college basketball. That's just the reality early, because again, a lot of people playing their first games of the year, and it's just one of those things that it just happens. It's just natural progression. But you hope to get to a point where at some point it becomes something that is not not blamed on the early season. That's not who this team is. And I think the 3-point pursuit the percentage I think will go up eventually. I just don't think it can remain that low. I think Holtmann's too good of an offensive coach. I think Brian Mullins is too good of an offensive coach to put any sort of real stock in that. But what I will say is I think it is important to not assess the box score, but to assess the quality of the shots that are being taken. I asked Holtmann about that. He wasn't too thrilled with that, but then he expanded on it today and said after the game he thought it was a lot worse than what it actually was. Again, more shots go in. Again, you're going to feel a little bit better about that. Andy, you anything on Stonehill before you want to dive into Buffalo here?
Honestly, I do not have much else on Stonehill. I just really hope that the offense is as much of an aberration as, obviously we all hope it is, because, again, they just could not buy a shot there. It wasn't for lack of them taking good looks. The one thing I like is today I asked Jeremy Lawrence, I just said, what was the conversation like for you guys as a team? And he said there was kind of a recognition among the group that, obviously the first 15 minutes of a game were stellar defensively. And I think anybody who was watching would agree if they happen to be watching ESPN Plus. But I think one of the things that I like that he said was it's a 40-minute game. We can't deviate from the game plan. We've got to not let up because, as he said, if you let one guy get hot, which in this case was a man by the name of Kofi Herman, or Herman Kofi, excuse me, then you are going to be letting – you're going to be leaving yourself vulnerable to a run like that Stonehill had where – you're sitting there at 5-6 minutes left from the game where they're up 2 and you're like, are we about to suffer the epitome of brutality 1 week into the season where this team does have legitimate expectations of moving themselves at least towards that bubble conversation by the end of the year?
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off of that, into Buffalo as the Buffalo Bulls come to Wintrust to take on DePaul in game number 3.
Brought their weather with them. They brought their weather with them.
Jesus, you know what? None of that. You know what? Your microphone is off now. All right. We're not, I hate the snow. And then it's going to be 60 at the end of the week. Like when we play Northwestern, it'll be 58 degrees. Shit, I might just go play golf on Saturday or Sunday. It'll be nice enough to play golf. But, I had to shovel my driveway and unbury my car this morning. It's just ridiculous. But that's enough. Buffalo comes to town. They're 2-0, wins over Southern Miss, and everybody's
favorite Gottlieb's Green Bay Phoenix, man.
Everybody's favorite radio host and basketball coach, Doug Gottlieb. And one thing that I think sticks out to me about Buffalo, offensively, good team. Defensively, very bad team. Defensively, they are, according to Ken Palm, in terms of 2-point percentage, ranked 327th in the nation in terms of the opponent's shooting percentage. And again, opponents are shooting field 2-pointers at 65%. That's something you got to be able to capitalize on. 37.8%. They're holding their opponents to from the 3-point percentage line, but offensively it's a very good team for the MAC. I think 69 in the country, nice in 3-point percentage, 92nd in 2-point percentage. This is a good test for DePaul. I think this is not to use this term in game number 3, but offensively for DePaul, this is a get right game.
Correct, 100%. And I want to shout out, a couple of guys on that team because, a lot of the offensive firepower lies in their upperclassmen, or if not upperclassmen, then there was a kid by the name of Daniel Freitag, who was a former top 100 recruit, transferred over from Wisco, didn't do much there. And through his first 2 games with them, he's averaging 13.5%, 13.5 points per game and 37.5%, from a 3-point line. But the guy that DePaul is really going to have to contain tomorrow is Ryan Sable, who is a third-year returner for Buffalo. He's been there all 3 years, and so far in 2 games for them, he's averaging 20.5 points per game, which is somewhere around top 50 in the country, and he's also shooting 42% from 3. Now, the concerning thing for DePaul, who has been prone to some occasional foul trouble here and there in both their exhibitions and early games, is they have 83+% free throw shooters, and 2 of them are those high volume scorers I just mentioned in Sable and Freitag. So if you foul one of those guys, more often than not, they're going to be able to capitalize on you. And they make up by themselves 34 points per game for Buffalo, who have been playing well offensively, even if their 2 opponents haven't provided much resistance in Doug Gottlieb's Green Bay Phoenix and also Southern Miss, who, for what it's worth, did also take South Carolina to the brink in a recent game as well.
Yeah, and I think Noah Batchelor is another key piece, a Maryland transfer in year 2 with the Bulls. He's 5 of 6 from 3. Like, that's 3rd in the country. Again, smaller sample size, just given everything. But again, 5 of 6 from 3, that's not nothing. Like, that is something. Again, I understand 2 games are played. He starts, but his offensive rating, he's the 88th best player in the country, according to Ken Palm, with his offensive rating hovering at about 161. And I think like this is a really good test for DePaul heading into Northwestern. You're a step up in class in terms of just conference opponent in from the NEC to go into the MAC. But also, right, I think that when you look at it, DePaul needs to figure out their offense, or else Northwestern is gonna, make the 45-minute drive from Evanston, not Chicago, and wipe them up and down the floor. Because DePaul just needs something just from a confidence perspective. It's not even so much about the wins and the losses; they just need to see it. Like, and I know I've talked about this with Ilya Miljasovic, but they just need to see it. And I think this Buffalo game, especially given some of their advanced defensive metrics, it allows that to happen.
No, I agree. And the one other thing I want to talk about that Chris Holtmann made a point to mention, I found this interesting because he didn't put a lot of stock into our own exhibition games. Like, he didn't like when I asked him after the Notre Dame game, he was kind of hesitant, which I understand because, coaches are looking more at certain lineups than box scores or any of that.
Correct.
But he was very hesitant to talk about really much of what he learned from perspective of playing the games versus just, okay, we found out this lineup worked, this lineup doesn't. Besides that, he didn't really have much to offer there, which is fine because, each coach has their own things they want to get out of it. I thought it was very interesting today that he made a point to mention during the media availability that Buffalo was within a possession of Syracuse with roughly a minute and a half to go in the exhibition they played. And the thing that, I think really exemplifies just how deep of an offensive team Buffalo is in that game, Syracuse held Sable and Freitag, who, again, I mentioned are 2 leading scorers, held them to a combined 14 points, and their leading scorer was a JUCO transfer named Ezra McKenna, who's 6'10" from U Mobile in Alabama. He had 18 points and 4 boards in that game. It was 7 of 9 from the floor and 4 of 6 from beyond the arc at 6'10". So they have weapons on this team beyond just those 2 top-end players who, if you let them get going, they will continue to get going, and they'll be able to bring their teammates with them.
Yeah, and I agree with your point because I wasn't on the Zoom for Holtmann's availability, but I went and listened to it, and I had to I had to go back and hear that. I was like, did he really just talk about the exhibition? And I think that is something that he wants to use as fuel in a way for his team. Because, again, DePaul almost blew a lead to Stonehill. Actually, in fact, they did blow a lead, and then they had to come all the way back.
They got it back.
But, again, you're not always going to get it back. Like, there will be a time where DePaul has a lead, and they will not get it back, and that is a sorry feeling. But I think that's important to bring it up. He brought up Syracuse because I think Syracuse is a comparable spot in their conference to where DePaul is within the Big East. So just in terms of caliber of the team and opponent, I'm not doing a 1-for-1, just generally. Yeah. And I think that, that's a step up in class for Buffalo from the MAC. And I think that he was using it because, again, any given night in college basketball, you can have the John Rothstein epitome of brutality losing a bye game tweet. And this is just really something that I think Chris Holtmann, I don't want to say is worried about, but it's certainly in the back of his head, especially after what happened last week But I think there's also something to be said about if you're DePaul, having a lead, blowing it, and then getting it back. I think that does something as well. So I think there's two sides to that coin. But I think I found that Syracuse exhibition point really interesting after he has literally said he doesn't take a lot of stock into the result of the game. But that one I found a little curious.
I did as well. And I just real quick, I think we unfortunately have to touch on, you talked about the John Rossian epitome of brutality. DePaul loses a bye game to Buffalo, the epitome of brutality, has been tweeted out one time before, and it came during the 2019-20 season when, for those who remember, DePaul was 12-1 in that non-conference campaign, including 3-0 over Big Ten opponents, including a blowout at Iowa. They won at Minnesota, and they beat Northwestern at home that year. They win at Boston College, and most notably, they beat Texas Tech in overtime at home, just one season removed from Texas Tech being in the national title game. And then DePaul's one loss that season is to Buffalo, who comes in. They beat DePaul 74-69. They out-rebound DePaul 47-35. And one of their players, Javon Graves, has 21 points and is just lights out from three that game. And so I think, from a fan base perspective, seeing that creep up against Stonehill where you have a lead that vanishes. I just think from a fan base perspective, this is going to be an important game because this is going to take them back to the last time DePaul really had a fighting chance to move on up in the Big East. They had a non-conference campaign to back it up. And the Buffalo game is the one game where when they saw him a schedule this year, they were just like, is this too good to be true? Is it going to be a repeat? So psychologically for the fan base, obviously Chris Holtmann is not concerned with that at all. But I just think from a fan base perspective, this is a game that they would be a lot more comfortable with DePaul having a much more safe and comfortable lead. And as you pointed out, one way to do that is by exploiting the offense that they just were not able to capitalize on last game, whether it was nerves, whether it was just shots not falling, like we said. Something was up with the offense last game, and I think tomorrow is a game that everybody would like to see that be corrected.
Yeah, according to Made for March, they had this back in May. I think the bye game guarantees $90,000. For this game. So for those who are interested in that kind of thing, $90,000 guarantee. Yeah,
the more you know.
The more you know. So, Andy, do you think this game's close tomorrow night or tonight, depending on when you're listening?
I think it's an interesting line for tomorrow because obviously DePaul was favored by, I believe it was 22 points against Chicago State. They get that done. And then I think Vegas was a bit, I hate talking betting, by the way. I just want to put that out there. But I just, if we're going off line, because I think that's the most realistic expectation of where people think it'll be at. I think low 30s was a bit optimistic for Stonehill. Now, I don't think anybody saw the result coming that we have, but I just think low 30s was a bit optimistic just for game two.
You mean 20s?
I thought it was low 30s. Regardless, I think it was a bit optimistic.
I think it was they opened as like a 21-point favorite, and then it went down to like 23.
I thought it was 30s. Never mind. But no, I think 17 points is fair. I just think that kind of illustrates that this game is not going to be as
not a pushover.
This game is not a pushover, and as we illustrated, their offense is quite good. Like it is. It is an offense that would win you some games if you had that similar squad at the bottom end of a power conference. Like they have some really good offensive weapons. Obviously Freitag is former top 100. You've got a third-year returner who's figured it out at the highest level. Like they have pieces on that roster that can light you up on any given night. And that's something that DePaul defensively cannot take lightly, but then offensively they have to be able to capitalize, as we mentioned.
Yeah, so just to wrap up Buffalo, I think this is a closer game. I think DePaul will still pull it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
double digits, I think.
Yeah, I think this is the game where defensive intensity and purpose is preached, and it's kind of a back and forth game for about the first half. And then I think DePaul's willingness to be physical defensively just kind of wears Buffalo down a little bit. That's how I see this game going. Again, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. But let's go ahead and talk about women's basketball as they had an interesting road test on the road in Vegas at UNLV as they lost that game. They did have a lead, several leads, in fact, early. Allie Tim was great. Kate Novick was absolutely fantastic. So Andy's takeaway on the women's side.
Well, I just think, obviously when you go into the Milwaukee game and you already know, again, the exhibition I keep bringing up, but, you go into the Milwaukee exhibition, you're down Meg Newman, you're down Kate Clark in that game, you're down Devin Hegman. Well, okay, you brought in Hegman to be one of your best guards from the transfer portal, and then you've got your best returning guard and your best returning forward both out. And then you see the team blow a 22-9 lead, they're down at the half, and they squeak away by 4 points. Given how many players were hurt, you weren't expecting much. And I think we were kind of just wary of, okay, where is this team going to be? They lay waste to Valpo the following week. And you have really good games from Natalia Nelson. And, like you mentioned, Kate Novick and Allie Tim had great games, but you had another career high for Natalia Nelson in this game, 17 points, 6 boards, where she is averaging currently she's averaging 15 points, 10.5 rebounds on 70% shooting from the field. And I don't know that, for as much as I've been high on her, I did not see her averaging a double-double through 2 games early on in the season, especially at UNLV, where that is, on the men's side, that's a program that's kind of fallen out of relevancy. But on the women's side, that's a program that's been top 50 to 60 for the past 3 to 4 years. So that is not a pushover program. That DePaul just went in and put up a valiant effort when they were still missing Devin Hegman, Shakara McCline, and the big 2 returners in Kate Clark and Newman. I am very impressed, if I'm honest, with this team yesterday. And they have a game at Bradley next on Wednesday, and they play, I believe, Loyola next, and then another bye game in Northwestern. I believe I have that correct.
It's Bradley, Northwestern, Grambling.
Okay, so I got Northwestern and Loyola in the wrong order.
Loyola isn't until the 26th, which I think is the day before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, you had Allie Tim as a freshman of the week, and she shot, I believe, 52.5% from 3 in the opening week. So there are a lot of girls on this roster who are making the most of the opportunities they have in the absence of some players. And it's just a fun brand of basketball. Like, you're watching at UNLV, and like they're picking pockets, they're moving the ball around, they're taking open threes, they're getting good looks inside. This is an offense that is flowing much more freely than you would have expected, given some of the firepower it's missing. And the defense is a lot more connected, considering how much youth they have on this team. Where Elena West and Allie Tim missed all of last year, and Natalia Nelson didn't play much last year, and she's one of the main pieces in this defense. And also, Kate Novick is averaging 2 blocks and 2.5 steals a game. And this is her 3rd game in a DePaul uniform.
Right.
Like, I don't want to say the sky's the limit with this team, because obviously UConn exists and Seton Hall is going to be quite good on the women's side this year as well. But I think 8th in the preseason might have been a bit low for this team, given not only the injuries, but what we've seen so far from the players who have been available and how connected they look already in just their 2nd game on the floor.
No, I agree, and I think it's intriguing because I think part of the reason they were picked so low in the Big East preseason poll, and I don't put a lot of stock into preseason polls for multiple reasons, but I think there was just a lot of unknown. Like, you knew what Kate was, you knew what Meg Newman was, but outside of that, it was really a crapshoot. Elena West coming back from injury, Allie Tim coming back from injury. You had a bunch of transfers that have done things at mid-majors, but nothing in a power conference quite like the Big East. And I think they have been a pleasant surprise. And I think that bringing quote-unquote Bruno Ball back, I think that is something that you really, really need to just need to do the small things right and wear teams down if you're DePaul. It's not a knock on the talent they have, but I think that's just part of the reality of what they'll need to do to compete this year.
No, I agree. And there's just one other performance I want to shout out, because obviously, you talk about the starters so much. We've talked so much on this podcast already about Allie and Kate and Elena and Natalia, but Justice Odom off the bench, I thought, gave a really good spark for them. She had 6 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists in 22 minutes. And I think that's the kind of backup center production you're looking for in the absence of Meg Newman. Because then once Meg's back, you can afford to play Meg and Michelle, and you'll have a much deeper front court when you've got Natalia Nelson and Justice Odom as options as well. So I just think it's nice to see people emerge as the season goes on against tougher competition, because then, like the men do, you'll have a much deeper front court roster when it's time to play the big important teams in Big East play.
Well, and I think part of that too is, and I never want to say injuries have are blessings in disguise, but I think just the reality of where DePaul is at, or they need players to play extended minutes more than you probably thought of or were counting on. And I think if you're DePaul, that is absolutely fantastic news because now you are allowing them to play and get extended minutes. You know what Kate is, you know what Meg is. Now you get to see what the rest of your team is, and then you can make more informed decisions instead of having for sures and then still having unknowns because they didn't play unless pressed into action.
No, 100%. I think it's going to be exciting to watch it all come together. They did get Isanique Mayo back last game, and she only played in this game, I believe, 4 minutes as she's coming off an injury that we still don't know what it was, but I would assume lower body, given how most of the team's been. But yeah, only 4 minutes for her, but she's back, and so you're able to work her back into the rotation against Bradley, and then you've got her against Northwestern as well. But I just think it's in a time where you didn't quite know what to expect in year one under Pizzotti officially as head coach, with both the injuries we talked about, it's just exciting to see a lot of players on that roster emerging in ways that, you don't always see with internal development anymore as the portal becomes more prevalent. The returners have really stepped up in a big way in the absence of the two best returners. And when the transfers and everybody have truly gelled and Meg and Kate are able to come back, this is a team that, short of UConn, I think is going to be able to sneak up on just about anybody in the league, which you haven't been able to say about the DePaul women for a few years. It's an exciting time for the team, I think.
Right, and I think that's, again, you want to talk about the men's program who needs a winner. The women's had just years of just success under Doug Bruno and just getting to the tournament, and they haven't been since 2018. I think it was the last time they made like a good run. Maybe it was 2019. 2020, they haven't made it just because of the COVID shortened season, or because everything was canceled. But I think it's just something to kind of keep our eyes on as we move forward. Andy, you got anything else before we get on out of here?
No, I do not. Let's get to Buffalo. Let's have a good game, and then, like we talked about last week, it's almost Northwestern time, baby.
Yeah, so for the great Andy Thompson, I am Nick Palazzolo. We thank you for listening to this episode of the DePod. So long, everybody.